Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is an internationally syndicated show solely due to the love and support that you all continue to show. We're available across all major podcast distributors, and like I mentioned, people, if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in because we are delighted to showcase this next guest on our network. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive Walter J. Eldredge. Now, for those of you keeping score, you recognize that name. You're like, man, that sounds familiar, man. He's been with you before. And if you guessed it, you're right, okay? Walter is a previous guest with us, man. Well, listen, the previous conversation went so well. He has a number of books to discuss. It was a no-brainer. We had to invite him back. Now, this time around, we're discussing his amazing book, Red Dragons, the Second Chemical Mortar Battalion in Korea. Previously, we had the pleasure of interviewing him for his book, Boiling Oil. And he also has another book, Finding My Father's War. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, man. It's a whole host of other resellers. But to gather everything that he has in store, remember his website, it's a one-stop shop. That's waltereldredge.com. Head on over there, pick up your copies today, look into everything that he has going on, because this is truly something you want to get your hands on. And people, listen, man, as I mentioned, it's an absolute delight to have Walter back here on the line with us, man. Listen, imagine holding the line for over 1,000 days straight. No relief, no retreat, just relentless combat in the harshest conditions of the Korean War. Well, that's exactly what we have in store today, okay? This is the untold story of the Red Dragons, the Second Chemical Mortar Battalion, whose brutal endurance and forgotten heroism helped shape the Cold War's outcome. Today, we're sitting down with the amazing Walter Eldridge, who unearthed their legacy through firsthand accounts and experiences. This isn't just a history book, man. This is a gripping saga of ordinary men pushed to extraordinary limits and why their sacrifice still matters today. Strap in because this conversation is about to bring the forgotten war back to life. Walter, first and foremost, man, welcome back to People of Distinction, and thank you once again for being a guest with us. How are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Walter, listen, man, it is a pleasure to have you here because, now listen, your books are remarkably compelling, and they offer a lot, man. They offer a lot of entertainment, but there's something that's great about the history that is also being disclosed, and such a personal, in-depth view that a lot of times we are not getting in the history books, man. So this really is an honor and something that we are thoroughly looking forward to. First and foremost, similar to last time, but just in case for our previous listeners, maybe that have missed the time that you were with us before, let's start off at the ground floor, at that foundation. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, please.
Well, I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I went to MIT and got a degree in mechanical engineering. Mm-hmm. And then came to what's now the Exxon Mobil refinery in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and never got man enough to leave, so I stayed there for 40 years. And then retired, worked as a contractor for a while, and then took up writing as a post-career career. Mm-hmm. And my first books were about my dad's World War II unit, both in World War II and later a book in Korea. And then I wrote a history of the refinery that I worked in. And my father and I together worked there for 60 years.
Love that. Okay. Okay. Well. Listen. I know your father has a big influence on a couple of your books, right? Red Dragons being one of them. So, without further ado, man, let's jump right in. Tell us more about this remarkable book.
Okay. Red Dragons tells a story of a combat unit that is unique in the American Army. And I underline unique. There was no other chemical mortar battalion in the U.S. Army at this time. There were 32 of them in World War II, but the gun that they used had been made standard for the infantry, and they were the only chemical mortar unit left. They had quite a distinguished record. They were 1,007 days in continuous combat. They were never relieved and never placed in reserve. They just went from one fight to another for 2.5 years.
Wow. Oh, okay. Whew, all right. So this is not where I was initially planning on going, but listen, you just brought it up and it doesn't seem right to go anywhere else. Okay. It's a fantastic segue. I have to know, man, listen, fighting over 1,000 days, 1,000 consecutive days, that is an almost unimaginable stake of endurance, right? In terms of what it would take. Well, during your research, during your conversations that you had, how did these men sustain themselves physically under such relentless conditions?
I think the comment that I liked the best was by a former sergeant named Carl Holtzman. And he said, when I think about what we did and where we were, I still literally cannot believe that it took place. It just seems so outlandish that people should endure that. But other than that, I think they just took it one day at a time. If you thought about the future, that way lay madness, because you didn't know what was going to happen. You literally didn't know if you would be dead or alive. You knew you would have a lot of physical hardship, and when you got down to it, it was coping with the physical hardship. And the fact that you were in danger was just accepted. You might get killed tomorrow, you might not.
Walter, listen, man, this is something that needs to be developed into a Hollywood film. All right? I'll tell you that much, okay? It definitely seems like a crime if it stops just here at this book, because my goodness, man, wow. I'm in awe. I'm in awe, and I know there is so much left. Well, listen, my follow-up question now that I want to go into, while you were compiling information, were there any individual acts of heroism or sacrifice? You mentioned a moment ago Master Sergeant Hugh Douglas Whitaker as an example of that, of the individual, right? To showcase in terms of the heroism. Let's go a little bit further in depth with that, man. Talk to us about some of those acts that otherwise may have been lost to history if not for this book that you present.
There was one incident which was during the Battle of the Chongshan River, which historians agree is the worst defeat ever suffered by the U.S. Army. And it was against the Chinese communists, and they had a tactic where they would infiltrate through the hills in the valleys, and after dark, they would gather in the valleys all around the positions, which the Americans typically made on top of a hill for better visibility and defense. And then at the signal, the Chinese would just come up the slopes literally from every direction. If you were in an American position, all you saw was Chinese for 360 degrees around you. And what I was told by people in the Fire Direction Center was we would hear gunshots and we would hear yelling, and somebody would start to give us coordinates for shelling, and they would go quiet, and the next thing we heard was gunshots. And obviously that position had been overrun. Well, Master Sergeant Whitaker was in charge of a gun position in the bed of a river. And they were firing missions to support the American positions a couple of miles away, which were gradually disappearing as they were overrun. And the Chinese got into Whitaker's gun position, and the gunners finished their missions, finished putting shells in while they were under small arms fire. They were getting wounded as they conducted their fire missions. Well, Whitaker decided that there was no way they were going to hold his position, so he had his men put thermite grenades into their muzzles to make the mortars useless to the enemy. And then he led his people out about 1.5 miles through pitch blackness, over a ridge, down a ridge, and into some safe American lines. When he got there, he looked around and realized that his group had gotten split up while he was leading them out, and he went back to see if he could locate any of the separated troops. He did locate some, and he brought them back in. It still wasn't all of his platoon, so he went back a third time. And by this time, there were no more Americans fighting in the woods. There were just Chinese with submachine guns. But he went in there and never came out. He was missing. The body was never recovered. He was never on any prisoner of war lists. He just vanished. The ground was retaken a few days later, and searches were conducted to try to find his body, but it was never found. And about 85 years later, we dedicated the Second Chemical Battalion at Fort Cavazos. They have a headquarters building, which is now the Whitaker building, in memoriam of that Master Sergeant's sacrifice.
People, listen, man, I'm telling you, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot left, man. I'm going to say it for you again. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's WalterEldredge.com. Pick up your copies of Red Dragons today. And remember, while you're at it, there are 2 other ones that we really got to mention because they are just as remarkable. One is the previous book that we discussed last time called Boiling Oil, followed by Finding My Father's War. These books are incredible, man. And you know, as we were doing research and preparation for the interview and through these conversations that I've had with Walter, I've recognized there's a common through line. Each of the books cover completely different subject matters, but they all have this connecting overarching theme of the human spirit, the strength of resiliency, the strength of unity. I mean, there's so much, man, but a lot of them, that's the common message. That's the common through line that I see. And that's where I want to go next. You know, Walter, we came across a message. I mentioned it in my opening, but of course it was not something that was created by me. We did take that from the back of your book because it was something that we came across and I thought was very powerful. Your book mentions the term ordinary men who drove themselves to extraordinary limits. And listen, man, I think that leaves an impression. It's so powerful. And then you hear about what you're discussing and what was needed, what was shown. Whew, man, listen, I want to know, while you were preparing these stories and writing this book, did you find a common thread in what motivated these soldiers to keep going through such arduous circumstances?
It's a cliche, but you say that soldiers don't fight for their country; they fight for the man on their left and the man on their right.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Red Dragons in Korea, I would expand that a little bit and say maybe it was for the 10 or 20 guys on your left and on your right, because you are absolutely correct. These men were families, and there were 3 companies, all of which operated pretty much independently. And when I go back and interview people, I find that they all know each other. They all have stories about each other. And they all remember each other fondly.
I love that. Walter, I mentioned it before, man, but I'm going to say it again. First and foremost, I'm so glad that you took the time to write and publish this book. Because as I started off the interview by saying, these are stories that you can't find in the history books, man. And if you didn't collect them, there's a very likely possibility they would have been lost to history. So first and foremost, I'm glad that you did. And now my follow-up that I want to go to, why? Why did you feel inspired or compelled to even write it?
Well, I had written a book about the battalion in World War II, and through that, I got in contact with the Korean veterans. And after I had been coming to their reunions for a few years, their president called me up and asked me would I serve on their board of directors. And speechless is not a term that's often applied to me, but I was speechless then because the thought that these men would take me in as an accepted member of their group, as a member of their board of directors, was overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And as I heard different stories, I realized that there were 2 different wars. For the first year, there was a war of motion. The Americans were driven back 800 miles, captured the ground again up to the Chinese border, were driven back another 800 miles, and then went forward again to what is today the demilitarized zone. The second half of the war was pretty static. The cost to attack was so high against entrenched troops and artillery that neither side wanted to make much of a attack offensive action to gain real estate. And so it was pretty much, we're going to have a truce sometime, so we better make sure our line is advantageous so that if peace comes, we can see into the enemy territory. Mm-hmm. So they would capture a small hill that gave visibility. But where the first half of the war, there was almost no static structure erected. In the second half of the war, there were elaborate fortifications, and everybody slept in what they called hoochies, which were bunkers made out of sandbags and ammunition boxes. And each thing had its own hardships. In the first half of the war, the mobility meant that sometimes you didn't stay the same night a night in the same place for 2 or 3 weeks. You would move every day. Mm. And the winter that year was the worst on record in Korea. It got down to minus 47 degrees. And the men were mobile, so there was no opportunity to put up tents. Mm-hmm. They just slept in the snow. And the same Sergeant Carl Holtzman, told me that when I went down the mountain to pick up replacements, I would take them up the mountain in the dark, and then I would get to our position, and I would say, okay, find yourself a patch of snow that looks comfortable and lay down in it. And don't get up until the sun is up, because if you do, you'll get shot. Somebody will think you're North Korean or Chinese, and you won't survive the night if you move. So if you have to go to the bathroom, just go, but do not might get out of the snow that you're in. In the second half of the war, the fear was more a constant underlying threat. The casualties were almost all by artillery fire from the enemy, and you never know when that was going to come. The Chinese did not know exactly where our guns were, so they would just shovel some shells out over a piece of real estate in the hopes of getting somebody. And so there were a lot of explosions up on the hill and down the road a bit, but every once in a while, one would come into the position without warning, and if you happened to be walking across the position at that time, you were dead. Even if you walked to the left of a Jeep parked instead of to the right of a Jeep parked, you might survive. If you had gone to the right where the shell hit, you might be dead. Mm-hmm. And men just learned to live with this as a constant condition of life. Was the imminent danger of death every hour of every day.
You know, Walter, listen, man, the Korean War is oftentimes categorized as the forgotten war. And you're talking about such harrowing depictions of sacrifice. And, you know, as you were talking, man, I was thinking, just between you and I, listen, man, if it gets lower than 68 degrees in my house, I'm uncomfortable, okay? I'm looking to adjust that thermostat because, listen, man, I need it between 68 and 71, and that's my comfort zone. So you're talking about people sleeping on the snow, sleeping on the floor, not being able to move, even to use the bathroom, because if they were, it literally is a life or death situation. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm curious, man, given that categorization of the forgotten war, well, while you were interviewing these veterans, did they express any frustration over the lack of recognition that they received?
Well, in response to that question, I would like to read some excerpts from my epilogue, because in the epilogue I address exactly that. If any group of men ever fulfilled their duty with honor, it was the Red Dragons in Korea. Unwavering for 1,007 days was the willingness to endure the hardships, face the dangers, fulfill the task to do what they're asked to do, and more. Mm-hmm. It has been argued that the Korean War served no purpose because after so much sweeping combat, so little real estate ever changed hands. But war does not change history through real estate. Its effect is on the minds of men. And the Korean War changed many minds. Mm-hmm. On the side of democracy, too many had believed that liberty could be purchased as the Minutemen purchased it, by leaving the farm and taking up arms. And the long, deadly, sad retreat that opened the war for the Americans, the democracies learned that they could no longer afford to approach war on the basis of first declare and then prepare. The price of liberty was not only eternal vigilance, it was also instant readiness. On the side of totalitarianism, many had believed that the democracies would never summon the will to resist aggression, as long as the aggression was carefully managed. They thought of America like the turtle that can be boiled to death if the heat is turned up gradually. Before Korea, they may have been right about this. After Korea, they knew they were wrong. And the dark forces of the Cold War never again deployed such arrogance in flaunting the power of the United States and its allies. They always fought war through proxies. We see that going on today in the Iranians. The Iranians fight with proxies. They don't challenge America directly. The effect of the Red Dragons on history is that they brought the time for larger forces to affect the minds of men. They fought and suffered and were captured or wounded or killed, while the great powers slowly came to the realization that if fight they must fight differently than ever before. The Red Dragons held the line while men in power made the decisions that led to half a century of Cold War instead of a hot war and the death of millions. They held the line while these men came to the conclusions that in the end brought victory to the democracies in the long Cold War. No less than the celebrated divisions of World War II, the Red Dragons and those they served with in Korea saved the world from evil forces and ensured it will be a better place for their successors. Although it's the forgotten war, the purpose of this book is to reassure the Red Dragons that they themselves are not forgotten.
Wow. Walter, listen, man, I had another question that I wanted to ask, and honestly, it doesn't even feel right to go into it. What you just read perfectly encapsulates the reason why we need to pick up this book. Young, old readers, it doesn't even matter. This is one that everyone needs to be exposed to. You know, and we talk all the time, and something that I mention every time I meet any military personnel, either through this network, on the streets, the common phrase and the accepted phrase whenever anybody meets a person with a military background is thank you for your service. And it's an appropriate response, right? But listen, man, after what you've depicted, a thank you just doesn't seem good enough, man. And what these individual soldiers had to go through, what they have sacrificed, all I can say now, people, you got to pick up your copies, man. It starts with this book. It's been there on the screen this entire time. I'm going to say it again. Remember, it's not just Red Dragons. Starts here for today, but I'm going to say it again. It's Boiling Oil. And then lastly, it's Finding My Father's War. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's WalterEldredge.com. Head on over there, pick up your copies today, and remember that the soldiers that he discusses in this book, man, we're bringing them back to life through this untold story. Because it shows the brutal endurance that they had to sustain, their forgotten heroism that shaped the Cold War's outcome as well as our world. And now it's on you to pick it up and continue that legacy. Because, man, listen, what they did should never be forgotten. Walter, I'm left here in awe of all of the work that you've been able to comprise and the remarkable heroism of the soldiers that you've been able to showcase for us. And I'm going to say it again, man. I thank you for developing it, but most importantly, I thank you for being here with us to showcase it all through people of distinction.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to spread the word, Ben.